Back, everybody. And let's get this started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar on the 5 stages of the ITIL service life cycle. Thank you for joining us today. This is your host, Tim Christie. Now, you may have read my short bio when you signed up for the webinar, and if you didn't, I would like to take this time to introduce myself. I've been working in the IT technical training industry for over 3 years now, and I specialize in helping IT directors, CTOs, and managers address their IT skills training needs. I could go on and on about myself, but I want to quickly move on to the real star of the show and the presenter of this webinar, Azhar Khuwaja. Azhar is a telecom and technology trainer with more than 20 years of experience in the industry. He is our resident ITIL expert and has helped thousands of students prepare for certification exams in ITIL, CompTIA, Azure, Linux, and Unix technologies. I'm sure you read about him before you registered, and I'm willing to bet that many of you are here actually because of what you read about him. Azhar is one of the most experienced instructors on our team and has put a lot of work in this webinar. So Azhar, please tell us why you chose this topic.
Thank you very much, Tim. Really appreciate it. We got a great response last time when we had this webinar about 4 weeks back, and we got quite many questions about the basics of ITIL. So we decided to choose this very basic topic and touch few fundamentals of this ITIL. And in our upcoming blogs, I mean in the webinars, we'll be going further into the details of this. So the reason for, as I said, choosing this topic is basically we got a lot of interest and quite a bit questions about this, the 5 stages and the basics. Yes.
Sounds great. Yeah, I know ITIL's always a very popular topic, so I'll be really looking forward to learning more about this. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody those who are now joining us. Welcome to the webinar, the 5 stages of the ITIL service life cycle. We are with Azhar Khuwaja, and we are just about to start with the presentation. So let's get this started. Over to you, Azhar.
Thank you very much, Tim, again. Well, before I start this session, just would like to say that, you're very welcome to send your questions, type your questions and send to Tim. And if you like, you can also email to Tim. And if you would like to post these questions on our portal, which is on the expertconnect.quickstart.com, you can post your questions over there, and we'll make sure that to answer your questions as soon as I can. So thank you very much for joining in, and really appreciate that. And we're gonna start now with the 5 stages of the ITIL service life cycle. As Tim mentioned, it's also it's a basic topic, but this is very useful. No matter if you at the foundation stage or at the intermediate stage or even at the expert stage of the ITIL, you always gonna talk about these 5 stages of ITIL service life cycle. Everything about the ITIL surrounds these 5 stages. So it's very important to have a very clear concept of these 5 stages. I do understand that we do not probably have enough time to cover, because normally I take about half a day to cover one of these stages, and in my routine trainings, but I'll try my best to provide you some examples so that we can quickly understand what these 5 stages are. So let's start, and I hope you can see my screen. So we have this agenda, which is first we will discuss some basic definitions about the ITIL, and then we will discuss these the 5 stages of the service life cycle, as I mentioned, and in the end we will also have a question answer session. But as I said, you can always ask questions whenever you would like to. You can just type in, and Tim will be very happy to answer your questions. So
Azhar, 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Somebody mentioned that they were not getting audio. If everybody else can hear me out there, can you maybe post a message in the chat just to make sure you can hear us? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Azhar, it looks like most people can hear. I'll try to help Eugene with this problem.
All right, so, okay. Okay, great. So let's start with, thank you very much. So let's get back to where we are. So as I said, before we start, there are a few fundamental definitions we're going to talk about in the ITIL. And as you know, ITIL is the Information Technology Infrastructure Library. And the reason we call it Infrastructure Library is because ITIL consists of 5 core publications. These 5 core publications are about the 5 stages of service lifecycle. So every publication in the core publication in the ITIL addresses one of these stages of service lifecycle. So in general, what is an ITIL? Well, ITIL is a framework. It's about the best practices which you apply in IT service management. If you're wondering what is IT service management is, IT service management is, here I can say that it's a bridge between the service provider's deliverables and the customer's expectations. So the more you are in alignment with your customer's expectation as a service provider, the better you can, be valuable to your customer. You can be more useful or the beneficial to your customer. So in general, ITIL, as I said, it's the framework. It tells you about the best practices which you can apply in IT service management. And then a general, a very basic question: what is a service? We deal with a lot of services every day. Even in the non-IT environment, or if you look at the IT environment, for example, calling a cab, using a telephone service, using these subscribe TV channels, the all services example. If we look into the IT, I can give you an example, which we will be coding in all our 5 stages as a internet service provider. You provide internet access to your customer. So that is an example of service. There are so many other examples, but the reason we will be taking this this example and throughout all the 5 stages, which we'll be mostly discussing in terms of examples. So the question is, what is a service? Service is simply means of delivering value to the customer by facilitating certain outcomes the customer wants to achieve, for example, and then without any ownership of risk or costs. So for example, if I'm providing these internet services to my customer, the customer is not responsible for any damages, any issues, any troubles, or any cost or the risk involved in my environment, in my infrastructure environment. The customer is only concerned with the outcome, and the service provider is responsible for these. So service is basically delivering value to the customer by facilitating certain outcomes which customer wants. For example, a customer wants a 10 Mbps connection, and so customer is not responsible for any server damages, any infrastructure failure at your end. That's the, we can consider this as a service. And what is a value? Value is always defined by the customer. The different customers have different expectation of value. The value is different for different customer. It depends on the customer's environment, depends on what type of business they are in. For example, for one customer, getting economical services, cheaper services, that's the value. For other customer, maybe getting a reliable internet access, that's the value, or a highly available internet access, that can also be a value to this customer. So it depends on customer and their environment and their requirements, what they exactly looking for. And then the question is, what is the process? There are around 24 processes we discuss in ITIL Foundation course. And these processes are divided among different stages of service life cycle. Some processes are associated with a particular stage, and the others are, then we'll be discussing the common ones. So the question is, what is exactly a process? It's basically a methodology, a set of activities designed to accomplish a specific objective. For example, incident management is a process, and we would like to deal with an incident. Risk management is a process. Availability management is a process. Similarly, service level management is a process. And in all these processes, we have defined objectives. We can measure the success of those processes. We can see what their input is, what their output is, and there are always stakeholders associated with these processes. So as I said, there are around 24 processes which we normally cover in the ITIL Foundation course. Then there's a term function. What is a function? There are 4 functions we discuss in the ITIL Foundation course, and all these functions we'll be discussing in the operations stage. So how it is different from a process. A function is basically a team or group of people, and the tools they use to carry out one or more activities. For example, service desk is a function. Application management is a function which deals with the application related. They are the experts in that. Or the IT operations management is a function. And you need sometimes these functions with the processes in order to get the desired output. So these are the basics we will be discussing, and I thought I can go through these. Now coming to our main topic, the 5 stages of service life cycle. The 5 is, first of all, what I mean by service life cycle. Service life cycle means from service creation to service retirement. That's the service life cycle. And ITIL divides a service life cycle into 5 stages. And in this way, it becomes very easy for us to apply that framework and apply those best practices which are recommended by ITIL. So the 5 stages of service life cycle are service strategy, service design, service transition, service operations, and continual service improvement. These are the 5 stages, and in this order you can start. And as I said, we divide a service life cycle into these 5 stages or phases, and then we focus on individual stages or phases and then different phases have different expectations or different processes associated with that. So we go through this and we take care of this, and this way we apply the ITIL best practices in an ITSM or IT service management setup. So that actually makes it very simple and very and that's the reason the ITIL is very successful, because there are also other frameworks, but the ITIL is the most common and widely accepted framework, and it's so simple. And that you divide, there are, as I said, 24 processes. Some processes are associated with service strategy, some with the second stage, which is service design. And in this way, all stages, all the processes are associated with one of those stages of service life cycle. And these processes help us to achieve a certain output, and we can measure the success of those processes. So it makes it very simple, very straightforward. And as I said, it doesn't matter whether you're at the ITIL foundation level or at the ITIL intermediate or expert level. You're going to discuss these 5 stages all the time. It's just like, if I give you an example, in the networking, there is a OSI protocol stack, which it doesn't matter you starting your career or you know, at the expert level, you always refer to that. This is a very similar situation. We always refer to these 5 stages and segregate and associate different processes with every stage, and makes it simple and easy to manage. So let's start with the first stage of the service life cycle, which is the service strategy. Service strategy is the first stage. And here we would like to know, as I said, from service creation to service retirement. And here is the first stage. So basically, in this stage, we talk about our objectives, our goals, what we're trying to achieve, you know, what kind of service we want to provide. That's covered in this service strategy. A clear identification of definition of services and who are the customers and the customer who wants to use them. So we want to see which services our customers are interested in. For example, now coming back to, because, you know, as we have a limited time, so if we can equate the, you know, the quote, the example, it will be much easier for us to understand. So let's come back to the same internet access example. Let's say I am an ISP, internet service provider, and I provide internet services to my customers. Now, service strategy stage is, you know, makes me gives me an opportunity as a service provider to see if I need to offer new services, modified services, and I need to retire some of the services in which my customers don't see any value anymore. So let me give you an example. For example, in this, as an ISP, I'm actually providing dial-up services. You know, through the let's take an example. I'm currently providing dial-up internet services. But then if I look into my customers, I see that they are now interested in broadband services. Because of the lower bandwidth, because of the you know, the aspect of you know, the missing reliability factor, they don't see much value in dial-up services anymore. So because my customers also may have customers, and so they have also their own direction, you know, how they're gonna go. So they do see value in, you know, migrating to, or, you know, acquiring the broadband services. So if I look into my customers and if I see, you know, my corporate customers are interested in, and they see more value, and this is what the trend is, this is what their expectations are, and they see more value in there. So this is the time I need to get into the broadband services. And this strategy is the phase where I can set the objectives, I can set my you know, aims, that, for example, we are XYZ ISP, internet service provider. We would like to now offer broadband services. You know, gradually we would like to retire our dial-up services, because we see that our customers, we, you know, and see more value in these broadband services. And also we see a huge market. We see a growing number of corporate customers are interested in broadband services. So this is what we're talking about, the strategy, where we set the objectives. You know, we have goals, looking at what our customers are looking for, what they see, you know, and what they expect in terms of value. And so we may want to retire our existing dial-up services. We may also want to modify our existing services, because we realize that our customers are interested in high bandwidth or the broadband services. So in service strategy phase, we create value for our customers by coming up with these, objectives, with these long-term goals. So in this stage, we think about why something has to be done. We're not concerned about how we going to do it, because in this stage strategy, we don't get into the specifics of the hardware, software, or the exact details. We do mention that, for example, we're going to use the DSL, for our broadband services, and we will be upgrading our infrastructure to optical. But then we don't get exactly into the exact details or the specifications that how we gonna implement this strategy. So we just talk about the high level, about the the what are the targets, and this is where we want to go into the broadband. We'll be upgrading of our existing infrastructure. We'll be offering these new DSL based broadband services, and this is how. So we're not going to talk about the how, but rather why we want to do this, because our customers see value in there. Now, there are some processes associated with this stage. As I said, every stage of service life cycle has processes associated with it. So which one are the most common processes in the service strategy? Well, that's the service portfolio management. What is the service portfolio management, if I can quickly explain? Service portfolio management is about all these services. It actually shows the mix of, or the balance of all the services a service provider is offering, or associated, or in with the service provider. For example, the services which are in pipeline, which service provider hasn't delivered yet, but which will be available in the future. So future services, then all the existing services which are available right now, customers can order and acquire those services. And the third category is the services which we, as a service provider, wants to retire. There are services in which we don't see any value anymore, so we want to retire some of those services. So service portfolio management has these three category of services. As I said, the services which are in future in the pipeline, the services which we are offering right now and the customers can order, and the services which are we going to retire. Then the other process with this is the business relationship management. Business relationship management is basically between the customer and the service provider relationship. It gives an opportunity to service provider to understand more about the customer's environment, customer's expectations, customer's changing business need, what the value customer considers in a service. So these are the things we discuss in the business relationship management, where we, it's a strategic relationship with the customer, where we see that, we have normally a dedicated employee, the account executive for that customer, who spends more time in the customer environment and see what their customers, direction is, what services they may be looking at in their changing environment in their future. And so this is what about the, so trying to understand more about the customer's expectation. Then there's also a demand management, which is also important from the service perspective, because you need to know, how much demanding that service is. And for that, you may need to understand the patterns of the business activity. For example, during certain time of the year, like in the holiday season, we get a lot of demand for certain products. For example, during the holiday season, we get a lot of demand for the electronics items, these shopping items and these things. So we need to understand when the demand for that particular service is at very high, or when it is low. So in this way we can manage it. And of course, in the service strategy phase, we need to also consider the financial aspect, because when you're setting up the targets, when you're setting up the objectives, for example, you want to migrate from dial-up to the broadband services, you need to also consider, do you have enough cash in your hand? Do you have enough budget in your hand to implement it? For, you may need to upgrade your existing infrastructure. So that's something you also need to consider in this. So these are the common processes which are associated with the service strategy phase of the service life cycle. The second stage of the service life cycle is the service design. So taking the same example in the ISPs, we have a set the objectives. We want to go to the broadband. Now that's fine in the strategy phase. But now how are you going to implement it? That's something we need to address in the design. So in design, we get into the specifics. For example, what type of services, 10 Mbps services will be, what type of technology will be using, DSL, what type of infrastructure connectors things we'll be using. So here we get into the specific designs, and we have all these stakeholders at one place, and we try to gather as much information, and then we try to implement what we have made the goals in the strategy, and we want to convert it into the blueprints that how can we implement it. So that's the design stage, where we get into the details of how we're going to offer, this, and what are the exact details of that services. For example, 10 Mbps broadband service, 1 gigabits per second broadband service, things like this. And then we also create a service design package, which is a document which addresses different aspects of the service. And this is a document which we can refer at any stage of the service in these service, which could be any stage, not necessarily in the service design. There are different processes, just like in the strategies. Some the common processes which are associated with the service design are design coordination, where you coordinate among all these stakeholders, see what is needed, what is required. Service catalog management is basically the list of all the services which you are currently offering. So it's like a brochure where you have the details of the all the services available and their deliverables, contact information, pricing information that you can see in the service catalog management. Service level management, where you can see what are the customers' expectations in terms of the targets. For example, 10 Mbps connection, that much reliability, highly reliable, for example, or low latency in the internet access. So here you can make a SLA, service level agreement, and document all the service level agreements of the customer. Supplier management is the process related to our supplier. We want to get best of what the money we are spending. And for example, in some cases, our service needs a certain goods or products from the supplier on the basis of which we can provide our services. For example, we sell the database solutions. So that not only includes our database software and configuration, but we also need to buy the database, the hardware servers, which we get it from the supplier. So we are dependent to the supplier in some cases. If we don't get the supply, we won't be able to deliver. So you need to have a some sort of agreement or the underpinning contract with the supplier, and in this way you can get the best of your money you're spending on this. Availability management is about making sure that your services are available whenever authorized users want to access it. For example, you're running a website where you, for example, shopping website. You want to make sure that your website is up whenever the authorized users wants to make a shopping, wants to see what is available there. So that's making sure about the availability aspect. Capacity management is another process where you make sure that you have a required capacity depending on your demand. For example, as I said, during the certain time of the year, let's say during Christmas time or during holiday season, you have a very high demand for certain products. The question is, do you have enough storage? Do you have enough production? Do you have enough manpower to make this production available? So that's something we consider in the capacity, and we audit almost on annual basis to see if we have the right capacity to deal with. Then the IT service continuity management is another process, and I can explain in few lines. It's about withstanding failures. For example, what happens if your server is down for any reason? There's a power outage, there is a damage to your infrastructure. What arrangements do you have to deal with that disaster? It's very similar to what we talk about, the disaster recovery planning or the business continuity planning. We know that how do you deal with those? How can you make your services withstand failures? So in this stage, we deal with that. There's another the process in this design which talks about the information security management. This information security management, as the name suggests, here we want to make sure that our services are secure. For example, the customers are coming to our website to make a shopping. Is our website secure? Is their information secure? So this particular process deals with the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, making the information or keeping the information private or only available to the authorized users. Similarly, integrity is about making sure that the information is not compromised, it's in genuine. And then the availability is about your services are available whenever authorized customers would like to use it. The third stage is the service transition. So what we did in the strategy, we made the long-term objectives, goals. We want to go from the dial-up to the broadband services because we realize that this is what our customers want. This is what our customers see value in this. And so we want to, get into this so that we can be more valuable to our customers. And that's why we decided to migrate our services to the broadband. And then in the design, we went into the specifics of what exactly needs to be done in order to have these broadband services. For example, invest in the infrastructure, implement the DSL technology, buy certain modems, train our staff, and things like this. Now in service transition, we need to deploy the services we designed in the previous stage into the live production environment. This is what we deal with in the service transition. So you have a design services, but now you want to deploy, you want to commission those services into the live business in the production environment. And you can't just do it right away because it's a production environment. You need to go through certain processes to make sure that your services, your transition is as smooth as possible. It should not give you surprises. It should not go into the in failure. So you want to minimize the risk. You want to minimize the chances of the outages. So that's why in transition, you need to deal with certain processes just to make sure that this process is smooth and as per our expectations. So here, all the changes we decided in the service design package, we implement it, and we use certain processes just to make sure that all our changes are smooth as per expectations with a minimum risk, and they don't result in any unplanned outages, any unnecessary risk, and in any unnecessary extra cost. So these are the things we need to keep in mind in the service transition. Like other stages, we also have certain um, processes in this stage, which are the common processes, which make sure that we achieve all the targets or the best practices in this stage. For example, transition planning and support. How are we gonna implement, how are we gonna deploy our services smoothly into the live business environment without unnecessary risk, without any outages, unexpected, unplanned outages, without any extra labor costs, without any additional timelines. We want to do everything as per our the scheduled planning. So this process actually helps us to do the things smoothly. Then there's another one, the change management. In my previous webinar, we spoke about the change management process, where how can we make the changes smooth, changes as per our expectations. And I gave you an example over there. For example, your vendor asks you to change your hardware, change your server hardware from 32-bit to 64-bit. Or your vendor, advise you to change your operating system from Windows Server 2012 to Windows Server 2016. Are you going to do it right away? No, because it's the live business environment. So you need to follow a certain process. For example, you make a request for change and then document all the advantages and the reasons you want to have this change. You present it to in front of a change advisory board. Based on their permission or rejection, you further go ahead with, and even if they permit you, you need to build and test it to see if it is as per your expectation, and then you apply. And still you need a contingency planning to see if in case something goes wrong. Then there's another process, service asset and configuration management. Here you keep track of all the assets which are needed at this stage, and you control their life cycle, you control the changes to their life cycle, and you have all their configurations documented so that you have all the complete record of those. Then there's another one, release and deployment management. Here you take care of all the releases. What is a release, by the way? Release is kind of the authorized changes is called a release. And in a service, depending on your customer's changing business environment or customers' requests, you may need to make changes into it. So release is basically a set of authorized changes you make into an IT service. It can be a component change, it can be a service change, it can be a asset change. It could be different one. Normally, just like you hear in the software, release 1.1, release 1.2, release 1.3. And why they come up with the new and new releases? Because they may see a bug in the software, or they may see some issue in the software, or maybe there's a vulnerability in the software. So they always come up with the latest version, and they can say this is a new release. And so these are set of authorized changes. Then there's another process we take into consideration into the transition stage is the knowledge management. Knowledge management is about the things which you have already gone through. For example, if you had the similar outage in the past, or you had the similar sort of incident in the past, what did you do and what did you learn from that experience? So rather than if we have the same situation again And rather than we rediscover the knowledge, why not we document it, what we learned, and so that if someone needs to do the same thing again in future or come across to this situation, then they should take advantage of the things we have already learned. They don't need to rediscover the knowledge. In this way, we can save time. In this way, we can provide these speedy solutions, and we can be more efficient. So knowledge management is about documenting everything we learn. We get for example, changing from this particular service to this service, we had these types of issues. Why not document it? So if someone gets into the same situation in future, they can always refer from this knowledge management documented or database and take advantage of already discovered knowledge rather than they rediscover it. Now that you have deployed services into the transition stage successfully, what is next? Well, the fourth stage of the service life cycle is about the service operations. So service operations, what is it? Now the service is already hosted, service is already operational. Why you need this stage? Well, in this stage, we take care of day-to-day operations, day-to-day issues, about the incidents, outages, performance issues, complaints by the customer, service degradation, so these are all the things we deal with in the service operations, because the service is already hosted and it's running. And in this stage, we take care of everyday issues, everyday activities, processes we need to carry in order to deliver and manage services as per our customers' expectations or agreed levels, or as per the target we have set in the SLA. So if you follow this stage, I mean the processes in this stage, you can have very minimal outages, performance issues, service degradation complaints. So it can be, so this stage is very necessary in running day-to-day operations. And you want to, get the satisfaction of your customers and their confidence in the existing services which you are providing. So this is the only stage where we have 4 functions in this stage. Which are the 4 functions we deal with? And these are the only 4 functions in the ITIL Foundation course. That's the service desk, technical management, application management, and IT operations management. Service desk is the one we are familiar with, where we, in our organizations, we're looking for any help. For example, password reset, we cannot boot our system, things like this. This is the service desk, which can help us in our day-to-day issues. And technical management is another function which deals with the infrastructure related issues. They are the experts in infrastructure. They are the custodian of all infrastructure related decisions. So if you have any thing to discuss in terms of any particular hardware, software, mainframe, middleware, database, any infrastructure related issues, this is technical management is the function which can help you with that. The third one is the application management. It's about the application, as the name says. So if you have issues or any questions or concerns about the functionality of a particular application, these are the people, or this is the team, or this is the function where you have experts who understand the details of those applications, and they can provide you an expert advice on different functionality issues and things related to the that application's functionality. The fourth one is the IT operations management. This is the function which deals with the the facilities, and it also deals with the for example the backup, console management, and these are the aspects. So these are the four functions which we have in this service operations, because we need a keep the operation smooth. The another process we have in this, the two common processes are incident management and problem management, where we deal with the day-to-day incidents. If you're wondering what is an incident, incident can be a disruption of service or performance degradation in service. That's an incident. So if you want to deal with it, you need to have this process which can guide you. What is the best practices, how you can resolve that incident. And what is a problem? Very similar to incident, but when you have a recursive incident, an incident which you have again the same type of incident, you don't consider it as an incident anymore, you consider it as a problem. So problem management is another process which can find the root causes of this issue and can help you to resolve it. So if you have a repeating incident, you consider it as a problem and you deal with it as a problem management. Access management is another process which about the authorization, as the name says, access. What is authorization? Who has access to what resources? In every organization, we have authorization restrictions. I cannot access HR records. Marketing department cannot access the R&D department's records. So we need an authorization set up in organization. So with this process, access management, it's about rights, it's about authorization, which we can use to make the this authorization in place. The last process which I want to discuss in this is the event management. Event management is about monitoring. If there is any issue, then you may be wondering how event is different from incident and the problem. Event is a very low profile issue, can be just an informational alert. For example, the door of your rack is open, your data center's door is open. It's kind of a warning or an alert about informational alert, you can say. So event management can be an indicator for a future incident, but in general, it's about the informational purposes. For example, having a, taking, for example, readings from the smoke detectors, HVAC systems, the temperature in the data center, humidity in the data center readings. They can always generate these alerts and let you know if you need to take care of that. The last stage is the continual service improvement. And this is, as the name says, continual, means it's ongoing, it never stops. So it is applicable to the previous 4 stages of service lifecycle. And in this stage, you look for the opportunities to improve the, you can bring more value. So you look for the opportunities in the previous 4 stages and see if you can find opportunities, identify opportunities where you can improve and then get the better output. For example, as a service desk, we are taking 50 calls per day. If we want to go to 100 calls per day, what should we do? By looking into the previous 4 stages I just discussed, is there any way I can, make changes or have a possibility to improve? And so in this process, in this stage, we use the Deming cycle, which is basically a 4-stage cycle: plan, do, check, act. And in this stage, we plan, we implement it, and then we see if we got the desired output or not. If yes, we implement it. If no, we reject it. And then again, we go back to the first stage. So it's an ongoing process. We only have a one process associated with this stage that's called 7-step improvement process. And in this, we not only use the Deming cycle, but we also use the knowledge management system, which we discussed before. And so basically, we start from a certain baseline. For example, 50 calls per day we are taking right now for the service desk. Then we look for what our vision or target is. We want to go to the 100 benchmark. So then the question is, how do we get there? And then you come up with the different plans or identify different ways. For example, increasing the number of technicians or adding more business hours, and then you see what targets you achieve. I mean, what's the output is. And based on this, you decide whether you want to go ahead with this or not. And then again, you start over. So it's an ongoing process. It's ongoing, this particular continual service improvement is ongoing, continuous, and it is applicable to rest of the 4 stages of service life cycle. It only has a one process associated with it, which is the 7-step improvement process. So in summary, if I can summarize, service strategy, as I said, about the long-term goals, what we're trying to achieve based on what our customers want to have, what they see value in it, and how can we as a service provider be more valuable to them. This is what we do in the service strategy. Once we have the strategy, we get into the design, and in design, we design the services which can address those services which customer would like to have. For example, as I said, maybe a 1 gigabits per second internet services with low latency, for example, or with high availability, or something like this. So we see what our customer, in the strategy, we realize what they want. And then in the design, we came up with the exact specification, how we design the service actually. And we get all the details about this specifications and coordinate with all these stakeholders, and we come up with those services. In the third stage transition, we deploy those services into the live production environment. And because it's a production environment, live environment, we want to have a smooth transition. So that's why we would like to have as minimal risk as possible, and we want to avoid any unplanned outages, any unexpected outcomes, and any extra labor costs or timelines. And once we have this, then we get into, now the service is hosted, we are in service operations, where we deal with day-to-day issues regarding the service disruptions, regarding the service, performance-related issues, day-to-day issues. And in the last stage of the service life cycle, we talk about we look for the different opportunities, and we identify the opportunities to improve this service. So the opportunity may be in first stage, second stage, third stage, or fourth stage. So we look for this, and we continuously look for those opportunities. So this is in general summary about the 5 stages of the ITIL service life cycle. And I hope these examples can quickly give you an idea that how these different stages are different from each other. Yeah. So any questions so far? Any?
No, I'm sorry.
All right. So as I said, feel free to email your questions to Tim, or you can also post it at our, portal, which is the expertconnect.quickstart.com, and I'll make sure to answer those as soon as I can. So thank you very much for your participation. Back to you, Tim.
Thank you, Azhar. Thanks, everybody. Feel free to reach out to me, as he said, at tim.christie@quickstar.com or at our Expert Connect channel. If you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions, we would love to hear from you. Thank you for joining the webinar and have a great day.